know you a monster of these beast boys.
Go and research the word Cenomix. Okay? Cenomix is a transnational company that creates flavor enhancement for products for transnational companies like Pepsi, Kraft, Nestle, Campbell's. And what they've been doing is that they grabbed kidney cells from human aborted fetuses. So they grabbed these kidney cell lines, las células sanguíneas de los riñones de bebés abortados, and in laboratory they replicate these cells and they put them in all your products. Lo ponen en los productos. What products are we talking about? Well, we're talking about your Gatorade. Drink some aborted babies. Yes, seriously. We're talking about Lay's chips. Yeah, that's why they taste so good, don't they? Pepsi products, all right? Tropicana juices, Dasani water, Minute Maid. We have to not consume anything from these companies.
What exactly is in your food? In order to know what you're eating, you need to know what you're eating ate. When an animal is killed for food, the heads, hooves, the horns, the intestines, and their contents, meaning poop, the bones and blood are deposited into huge grinders at rendering plants. 6 or 7 million house pets that are euthanized in animal shelters every year, and roadkill are also taken to the rendering plants. No animal is too ill, too cancerous, or too decomposed. These horrid ingredients are then ground and steam cooked. The heavier protein stuff is dried and made into a brown powder that includes fecal matter. This brown powder is added to almost all pet foods, as well as to livestock feed. In short, the food your food ate consists of dead pets, roadkill, diseased animals, reject parts, and poop. Maybe the poop in your food's food doesn't concern you. What about the poop in your food? In a study conducted by the USDA, they found that 78.6% of ground beef contains microbes that are spread primarily by fecal matter. Once upon a time, USDA inspectors had to condemn any meat with fecal contamination. But about 30 years ago, the industry convinced the USDA to reclassify feces. Feces are now classified as a cosmetic blemish. In the poultry industry, after immersion in a scalding tank, chickens go to a massive refrigerated tank of water. Tom Devine from the Government Accountability Project has said that the water in these tanks has been aptly named fecal soup for all the filth and bacteria floating around. While a significant number of European and Canadian poultry processors employ air chilling systems, 99% of U.S. poultry producers have stayed with water immersion systems. It's not hard to figure out why. Air chilling reduces the weight of a bird's carcass, but water chilling causes a dead bird to soak up water, the very same water known as fecal soup. Jonathan Saffron Farrar states, U.S. poultry consumers now gift massive poultry producers millions of additional dollars every year as a result of this added liquid. The USDA knows this and defends the practice. After all, the poultry processors are simply doing their best to feed the world, or in this case, ensure its hydration. Of course, you might notice that your chicken doesn't quite taste right. How good could a drug-stuffed, disease-ridden, shit-contaminated animal possibly taste? Independent turkey farmer Frank Reese says, everyone knows it's our food. We're messing with the genes of these animals and then feeding them growth hormones and all kinds of drugs and antibiotics that we really don't know enough about. Kids today are the first generation to grow up on this stuff, and we're making a science experiment out of them. Isn't it strange how upset people get when a few dozen baseball players take growth hormones, when we're doing what we're doing to our food animals and feeding them to our children? Got pus? Milk does. Due to the infections caused by the unnatural treatment of dairy cows, the dairy industry is actually allowed a certain amount of pus in its milk, 180 million cells per 8 ounces to be exact. This is termed the somatic cell count, and it's an industry standard. Milk also contains the antibiotics given to the cows in order to fend off the very infections that produced the pus, as well as blood, bovine growth hormones, and, you guessed it, feces. And what about our processed food? Any food that's processed is virtually tasteless. So where does the flavor in your food come from? New Jersey. The area produces about 2/3 of the flavor additives sold in the United States. In Fast Food Nation, Eric Schlosser writes, calling any of these flavors natural requires a flexible attitude towards the English language and a fair amount of irony. Cochineal extract, known as carmine or cominic acid, is made from the desiccated bodies of female Dactylopias caucus costa. The bug feeds on red cactus berries, and color from the berries accumulates in the females in their unhatched larvae. It takes about 70,000 of them to produce 1 pound of carmine, which is used to make processed foods look pink, red, or purple. Starbucks strawberry frappuccino and Dannon strawberry yogurt both get their color from carmine, as do many fruit bars, candies, and fruit fillings. Here are some ingredients listed in Consumer Reports' Shop Smart Guide as weird but edible. Ammoniated beef. Trimmings of meat are gassed with ammonia to kill pathogens. This is the pink slime that went viral on the internet. Bacteriophages. This additive actually contains viruses. It's sprayed on ready-to-eat meat and poultry products to destroy the bacteria. Sodium nitrate. High cooking temperatures and stomach acid can cause these chemicals used in processed and cured meats to form compounds associated with cancer. If all of that isn't enough for you, have you ever wondered where artificial raspberry, vanilla, or strawberry flavors come from? Castoreum. An extract made from dried, ground-up sacs located by the anal glands of beavers. Yes, we're talking about pouches in the ass of a beaver. It can be added to foods such as gums, alcohol, candy, and baked goods. Perhaps tossing a beaver salad does give you a nice little vanilla flavor, but does that really make it right? So, let's review. Being vegan is extreme, but eating antibiotic-pumped meat, shit water-inflated birds, nipple pus, ground-up beetle fetuses, shit-contaminated meat, and beaver ass pouches is a-okay. Believe it or not, this is just the smallest peek into what's in your food.
It gets worse than this. It really does. I was looking at it. I almost got ran out of one town I was in, but that happens a lot with me anyway. I was somewhere and I was telling them that white sugar is a pork sweetener because they use pork to make white sugar. And then I said, Assalamu alaikum, because they make these bean pies with this pork in it. And then they all say, the minister and all these things they say to you. And I say, look, in the processing of white sugar, they use the blood of a pig. So you're using a pork sweetener to make this bean pie. And the only way they can make it calcium enriched is they buy the bones from the slaughterhouse and grind them up and put them in the bleached white flour to make it enriched. So now you got pork bones in the flour, pork bones. I say, Assalamu alaikum. Yeah. And so the people, they get all kind of upset about certain things. But nonetheless, it's just insidious because we're following these people who go the direct opposite of what you're trying to do. Direct opposite you follow. Now you understand, when they used to travel on the ships, they used to carry their food supply with them. Now first they would carry the rats, then they would have the cats, and then they would have the dogs. The scraps would fall down and the rats would eat that, and then the cats would eat what's left and the dogs would eat that. And as they progressed across the ocean, we're busting those hulls, chained. They run out of food, then they eat the dogs. Then they run out of dogs, then they eat the cats. Then they run out of cats, and then they eat the rats. They've always eaten rats. They just stopped eating them, and now they don't know what to do with them. And I always say, well, you know what to do with them. They act like, they haven't been eating them all this time. But I know their history. They like rats. They dress, the most expensive coat you can get is a coat made from rat fur. A mink is a rat. So I look at them with the little rat fur and, all kinds of stuff. Talk to me. Nonetheless, they carried their food supply with them. But if you don't know their history, you don't really know what's going on.
Industry-wide secret butchers don't want you to know about. Major suppliers have been caught using a special product known as meat glue to stick together scraps of meat to sell as prime cuts. But while this product has been banned overseas, there's no law prohibiting its use here. Here's Rodney Lowe's with this special investigation.
It's the meat industry's dirty secret, a way of turning the scraps too small to sell as a premium steak back into a juicy, plump eye fillet to sell for a premium price. So clever, you'll never tell. Not even an expert can.
Before, you didn't even pick that as a join, though, did you?
It doesn't even tear through the joint. A bit hard to tell, isn't it?
Butcher James Faulkner runs Queensland Natural Beef Company, an organisation dedicated to using as few additives in meat from paddock to plate as possible. But tonight, he's exposing how some parts of the industry are able to trick their customers and use whatever it takes.
Yeah. I've just got some fine diced beef and my special enzyme. I'm just going to mix it up a bit.
Why have we got the masks on?
This is dangerous. See that? Don't breathe that in.
This powder is transglutaminase enzyme, otherwise known as meat glue. Meat glues come in a number of forms, some produced by cultivating bacteria, the others, the primary ingredient comes from the blood plasma of pigs and cattle, specifically the coagulant which causes blood to clot. In the food industry, it has amazing properties.
So just got a little bit here, about a teaspoonful.
Yep.
Just over the top like that. And with our gloves on, of course, we mix it up.
Then roll it in plastic film and refrigerate. 6 hours later, you have a solid piece of meat.
And essentially, you've got a reborn, rebirth thigh fillet.
More or less, yeah.
Ours uncooked is easy to spot the difference, but cooked is another story.
Okay, so the meat glue one is on the right, and the real McCoy is on the left.
And it's not just beef. Pork, lamb, fish and chicken are all stuck back together using this glue.
It looks like one piece of chicken.
It's unbelievable, isn't it?
Yep.
But hard to tell, isn't it?
Particularly that.
On the grill, it's even harder to pick.
So that's the real McCoy. Give this a burl. Nice and tender, nicely salted. All right, let's go for the meat glue. I can't tell the difference.
Pretty good, but potentially dangerous.
I've sort of got two concerns. One that is well publicised, which is misleading people. The other area is the microbial side.
It's why the European Union moved to ban meat glue in May last year. Microbiologist Glenn Pinner.
If this food is sold or represented as a solid piece of steak and you cook it rare, you're really leaving yourself open to get food poisoning.
Once you glue two pieces together, it's difficult to cook thoroughly those parts that were on the outside but are now on the inside.
The amount of bacteria on a steak that has been put together with meat glue is hundreds of times higher.
We had no idea how guarded a secret this was until we started contacting restaurateurs and butchers to ask them about the use of meat glue. Many of them didn't want to speak for fear of upsetting their suppliers, creating bad blood in an industry that has become very clever at using this product. Are you just shaking your head?
A little bit. It's unbelievable, isn't it?
This cube roll we bought from a wholesaler that produces stuck-together steaks en masse. Their effort's so good, James, our butcher, couldn't tell even when it was raw. It's even harder in the restaurant, which are some of the biggest users of glued meat. And chances are, unless you're a vegetarian, you're eating it on a regular basis. But with current labelling laws, neither butchers nor your local eatery have to tell you you're eating chicken glued together with cow's blood or beef held together by pig. It's the same reason they can take low-grade meat and pump it with water and flavour to make it edible.
Okay, so just after about a minute or two, we've got quite a lot of moisture out of there. And we've lost almost half a kilo.
Then the practice of selling mutton as lamb and old cow as prime cut beef. Like this, so old, a meat grader said it was only good for pet mince.
You've got yellow fat colour, really dark meat colour. It's definitely off a really old type of animal.
In New South Wales, new labelling regulations have just been introduced to help consumers choose quality meat, but it's not compulsory. So for most of us, picking a quality piece of meat is still a shot in the dark.
This is the ultimate secret, and it's about to be exposed. have hundreds of government documents, textbooks, white papers, where for over 80 years, the elite of the Western world have talked about adulterating food and water to sicken and sterilize the population for the purpose of eugenics. It's all covered in the book Eco-Science, written by the White House science czar, John P. Holdren, where they talk about a planetary police state to carry out the forced sterilization. They also talk about covert systems in the water and food to sterilize the population. Now, this was written decades ago, before he was White House science czar. Now, suddenly, the stuff in this book is all over the news. They're selling it to the public as if it's a good thing. You see here before you what an average person would buy when they went shopping at the store. Not everything here is bad for you, but much of it has compounds and artificial chemicals that have been added that are extremely toxic and bad for your health, and they have known this the entire time, and they have approved them for use. Let's start with aspartame. You cannot go to the grocery store now and buy any type of even regular sugar gum that hasn't had aspartame added to it. In the 1970s, Searle tried to get it approved, and they couldn't. It took them 3 separate times because in their own studies with monkeys, large portions of them that were fed it died and contracted cancer. Now we have mainstream news articles, and the EU has done a major study finding lower birth weights, early birth, and yes, miscarriages from women that drink aspartame-laden soft drinks like Coke Zero. What is aspartame? It is the fecal matter of the E. coli bacteria. They took it and genetically engineered it. They can feed it toxic waste, and then it defecates aspartame. And it has so many bad health effects, it's just unspeakable. This is being done by design. It's also very, very addictive. But let's just go ahead and move away from aspartame and talk about McDonald's and chicken McNuggets. Now, I remember a decade ago or so reading health advisories claiming that a form of plastic that's used in silly putty, basically a type of silicone, was in the chicken McNuggets, but also in many other TV dinners and other foods. It is illegal in every other nation in the world to add these chemicals to the food, but it's not in the United States. The big secret is all of this was done by design by the FDA. Look at all the drugs they've approved, and then it comes out later that they knowingly approve them when these drugs are causing heart attacks and cancer. In the Nuremberg trials, it came out that the Nazis were adding sodium fluoride to the water supply in the labor camps and death camps to make the population more docile and controllable. There had been hundreds of university studies before Hitler even came to power. This is a form of forced medication. They admit that 1 part per million of sodium fluoride more than doubles the chance of bone cancer in boys and men. As the public became educated in the last few decades, the government and industry's response was to not just put it in water, but to start adding it to thousands of products like children's water that's mixed with their formula or with their cereal. They started adding as much as 900 parts per million in things like powdered eggs. It causes reductions in IQ. It increases sterility or lack of fertility, and it's being added to so many of the daily staples that we consume. We'll get back to food additives in a moment. But first, I wanted to look at genetically modified organisms. Did you know for many years the American people have been eating cloned beef and pork, and now they're expanding out into other forms of meat? Let's look at salmon first. Major university studies conclusively have proven that the type of genetically modified salmon that is actually a cross species, they've mixed other animal genes in with it, that when this fish is introduced with wild natural salmon, within 40 generations, all of the natural salmon are extinct. And the FDA approved this. And they're going to allow it to be released into the wild that isn't even a salmon. It is a cross-species chimera. It is a mixture like something out of the island of Dr. Moreau, something out of a nightmare. More than 85% of the corn now consumed in the United States, and it's also starting to trend that way in Europe and Canada, is genetically engineered. It grows its own pesticide within the corn kernels so that insects won't eat it. If the insects can't eat this and live, what do you think is going to happen when lab rats or humans eat it? We have literally hundreds of studies showing that not just Monsanto's, but other major GMO companies' corn, that's the majority of corn we're now eating today in the United States, has been linked to organ failure in lab animals. The studies also show massive increases in sterility in rats and guinea pigs that are fed not just GMO corn, but GMO cotton seeds. Studies in India, Germany, and the United States have conclusively shown that when they feed the cotton seeds left over from the cotton crop from these genetically modified varieties, that the cows are having miscarriages, they are having low birth weights, or in many cases, they're simply dying. And what is in most processed foods? Genetically modified cottonseed oil. Major studies are also showing that genetically engineered crops are killing honeybees and monarch butterflies. But they don't stop there. Now they claim they're coming out with a genetically engineered mosquito that's malaria-proof that they're going to release into the open biosphere. The very genetic code of the planet is being butchered in a hostile corporate takeover. Many years ago, an executive from Monsanto was quoted in National Geographic as saying that that is their program, that they want to basically have their crops and their organisms take over the entire biosphere of this planet. And the major genetic engineer companies have focused mainly on 8 major food crops. Now they're expanding out into hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of other plants, literally changing the genetic code of the planet. This is a genetic dictatorship. This is genetic vandalism. And that's why the Rockefellers, the United Nations, and others have built these giant armored seed vaults all over the world, not just at the Arctic Circle. And they admit they're doing it in case all of this gets out of hand, that they'll have a type of Noah's Ark. So all these fake environmental groups, they never complain about this. They never talk about true environmental degradation. They want to put a tax on carbon dioxide that humans exhale, that plants respirate from and carry out photosynthesis with, as a way to shut down industrial society and control every facet of our lives. That's the big secret. This is a population reduction program. It is an epidemic. The sperm count has dropped in the Western world exponentially. Even the government has been predicting within another generation, almost everyone is going to be sterile. This is the globalist religion. This is their philosophy. They want the planet for themselves. The UN has said that their stated plan is an 80% population reduction. You've heard Ted Turner call us useless eaters and feeders and say that 80% of us need to be killed. You've heard Prince Philip say he wants to come back as a virus to kill the majority of the world population. Dr. Eric Pianka, Peter Singer, it's all over the news where they tell us that we should only have one child because more than one is bad for the environment and that the recession is good for lowering our carbon footprint. This is the big secret. We live in a scientific dictatorship, and the United States and England are the epicenter of this, and it's expanding worldwide. Remember all the secret testing, all the secret sterilization that went on in the United States and Europe. Remember what Hitler did. He learned all of that from the eugenicist and the Rockefeller family in the United States. This is a culture of death being pushed on you and your family. And even if you think the world is overpopulated, you need to understand that you're being targeted by this as well. Targeted by design. Recombinant bovine growth hormone in your milk, making 8-year-old girls go into puberty when they should be going into puberty at 12 or 13. Silicone in chicken McNuggets and hundreds of other processed foods. aspartame, that is the feces of genetically engineered bacteria that has incredible health problems that have been proven. Think for yourself. It goes on and on. ABC News, this goes back 4 years ago. Viral meat spray, advancing food safety. They spray a live virus on the meat to supposedly kill the bacteria. This is a live vaccine they spray on most of the meat you're consuming that you're buying from the store. It gets even worse. The petroleum distillates, or toxic waste that's left over from petroleum refineries that refine oil into gasoline, they take these tens of millions of pounds of toxic waste that's left over, the fluoride, the mercury, the lead, and they dump it on crops as supposed fertilizer. And what do crops like tomatoes and corn and potatoes do? They pull in all of those toxins out of the ground. In fact, scientists for many years have used plants to actually detoxify areas that have been contaminated. And those plants are pulling all of this up, and then you are eating it. That's why the Washington Post reported in January of 2008 that a major study found that nearly a third of the 55 popular brand name foods and beverage products were filled with mercury. Despite the fact that the people of Europe for over 20 years have fought off all the genetically modified wheat and corn and other crops being planted in their nation, now the EU is buckled and is accepting it. The United States is literally a testing ground for all of this. It's just automatically approved. And the people that work for these corporations, they're compartmentalized. They don't know what's going on. The people that work at these stores, they have no idea what's happening. This is affecting all of us. This is hurting everyone. Many different forms of cancer are growing by thousands of percentage points. Diabetes, all these different diseases. And in major studies, it's all been linked to the toxic additives that are in our food, our water. And I haven't even had time to get into MSG. I mean, I've interviewed brain surgeons, neurologists, scientists. I mean, it just devastates the brain. It's an excitotoxin. It destroys the liver, and it is in tens of thousands of products. We can say no. We can stand up. But if you've got a neighbor giving fluoride water to their baby, please go over and warn them. If you got a neighbor that's sitting there eating MSG-filled chips, one after the other, warn them. You've got a responsibility. If you know people that are feeding processed foods filled with GMO, warn them. And for God's sakes, don't give it to your own children. If you want to kill yourself, that's your own business. But don't hurt your children. Don't do this, ladies and gentlemen. In closing, I want to talk about some positive things. Just 15 years ago or so, you couldn't find organic food anywhere on store shelves. And now, about half of what you see is organic. Just a few years ago, all the milk had the growth hormone in it. Now it's hard to find milk that has the growth hormone in it because the consumers have spoken and said no. A few years ago, you couldn't find toothpaste that didn't have sodium fluoride in it. Now Tom's of Maine is starting to take over the aisle space and displace the other mainline toothpaste makers, where it says on the back, if you swallow this, call poison control immediately. Even Colgate is now putting out fluoride-free toothpaste. People are demanding that they not be poisoned, and they're finding out about what's going on. And so industry is starting to respond and at least give people who want a choice an option to not be forcibly medicated through the food and the water. You know cigarettes are bad for you. But just 20 years ago, the cigarette makers were getting up before Congress and saying it was a conspiracy theory that it was killing people. And then later it came out in their internal documents, they knew it was deadly. Ladies and gentlemen, I've seen the studies. Much of what they're putting in our food and water is far worse than even cigarettes, as bad as they are, one of the biggest killers in this country. This is a covert, soft kill operation. We'll put a lot of links beneath this video so you can check out the facts for yourself. And I'm just begging you to do your own research and find out that one of the most dangerous places in the world is your grocery store and the tap water in your house.